Happy Sunday, everybody. How are you guys doing this morning? Good? Glad to be gathering together. Man, I am so grateful to have Pastor Mark here this morning. Just love the way that he leads all of us with such vision and passion and authenticity. Aren't you guys grateful for our lead pastor? What a gift to this community of faith, and he has led us through this series. Didn't see that coming. I think with such hope and such encouragement to keep trusting God. And if you have missed any week of that series, I want to encourage you to check that out. All the messages are on our YouTube page, but like he said, it is officially Christmas time around here. And I know in my family, we are big believers that Christmas cannot start until after Thanksgiving. Some of you agree, some of you not so much. But last weekend, it was game time. We got our Christmas tree, we decorated, we put up some lights. I helped my kids make their Christmas list, which was one of my favorite parts of Christmas as a kid, was making a Christmas list. And I have learned that as an adult, one of my favorite things is when people stick to the list. Anybody else appreciate when somebody just sticks to the list that you give them? Yes, you're like, Mom, it's right here. Just stick to the list. And growing up, my mom was very generous. She would often buy us things off the list, but every Christmas, without fail, she would inevitably go rogue. And I'd have a moment where I'd open something on Christmas and I would say thank you, but I would be thinking, I'm never going to wear this thing or use this thing ever again. Sometimes I'd have a moment where I'm like, what is this thing? Like, I don't even know what this is. One year she got me this like silicone bowl that you microwave popcorn in, but I don't really eat popcorn. There was a year that she got me a heated blanket, and I was like, I am not an 80-year-old woman. Why did you get me a heated blanket? One year, she knows I love to run, so one year she got me this running top that had this attached hood to it, and it was like this slick-fitted hood. And I remember opening it up and thinking, what kind of nerd would run around like a superhero, like they're in some sort of Marvel movie, you know, with this thing over their head? But all of us have heard the phrase, moms know best. So I am here to tell you that I have not just used, but ended up falling in love with every one of those random gifts that she's got me somewhere along the way. And every time I have run a race in the rain in the last 3 years, you better believe that I wore that top with a fitted hood. And I was like, I know I look like a nerd, but my head is dry. Which what more could you ask for? And we've probably all had these moments in life where we asked for one thing, but we got another thing. And sometimes there were things that are far bigger than a wish on a Christmas list. We're looking around at our lives and we're like, this is not what's on the list. This is not what I asked for. Maybe we thought that we would get that promotion and then it went to someone else in our firm. Maybe we thought that this relationship would flourish by now, but it's starting to fade. We thought for sure we would be back to in-person school, but like we're still virtually learning and we're zoomed out and we're isolated. And in those moments when our expectations don't quite meet reality, we all have a choice to make. Are we going to complain? Are we going to figure out how we can just get on to the next thing? Or are we going to stay hopeful for what could be and what's ahead? And so today we're reading about a group of people in the Bible known as the Israelites. And they were God's chosen people, which means that they had the favor of God. He had good things for them. And the good news is that for all of us, no matter who we are, no matter what our background is, we all have an opportunity to be part of God's family of faith through our faith in Christ Jesus. We all can experience the privileges of being part of God's family. And so a few weeks ago during this series, Pastor Mark shared a miracle that these Israelites had experienced. They were on their way to a place called Canaan, which was this land that God had promised them. So they're on their way, but their enemies were chasing them and they had nowhere to go. They didn't know what they were going to do. And then the sea, this huge body of water in front of them, opened up. They got across. Their enemies experienced demise on the other side, and it was a miracle. I mean, think about that. They were under attack. This sea opens up. They get to go across. It was a miracle moment. It was a mountaintop moment for them. So they start praising God. They start worshiping him for his strength and his power. But then not too long after that, they're back in the desert on their way to Canaan, and they don't know how long it's going to be until they get there. And it's hot, and they're hungry, and they're tired, and they find themselves complaining. They forgot about where they're going, and they're just really focused on the here and now. And that miracle that God did seems like a distant memory for them. So they start complaining. We're going to pick it up in Exodus 16, verse 3. If only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt, they moaned. There we sat around pots filled with meat and ate all the bread we wanted. But now you've brought us into this wilderness to starve us all to death. So clearly we got some hangry people on our hands. Like there is an uprising about to happen. And what's so interesting about this is we have to remember that these Israelites, they were slaves when they were in Egypt. They were oppressed. From the way they're talking, you would have thought they were living their best life in Egypt, but that couldn't be further from the truth. They were enslaved in Egypt. But in this current moment, they were so fixated on their circumstances. They were feeling hungry and tired and lost and weary. And so what they do, they let their current circumstances dictate their response. And they started idealizing the past. And I think many of us have done this. We've probably done it recently. We're like, take me back to 2019. Those were the days. Take me back. That's where I want to go. But the truth is, if we pause, many of us can admit 2019 was not everything that we've made it out to be. And it wasn't really all that much better than 2020, or the year before that, or the year before that, or the year before that. But what happens is we get so fixated on the here and the now. And I know I've done this. I'm a mom to 2 young kids, and I have days sometimes where I'm like, take me back. What was it like to only be responsible for me? Like that was the life, right? And so sometimes I'll like idealize that. And people are like, we don't have kids yet. And I'm like, just stay right there. That's where you want to be in life, right? But like, that's not true. My kids add so much joy to my life. But in those moments when they're screaming and they're crying and somebody's like, I need to be wiped, and somebody else has smeared food at a place I'll probably never find it, like, I'm just like, take me back. This is not where I want to be. Because we can just let our current circumstances dictate our response. We let our emotions lead and we forget about what could be. And the same thing was happening for the Israelites. They were so fixated on the here and now that they weren't looking at what was ahead. And the truth is, we can never experience what God has for us next if we're just fixated on the past. He can't move us forward if we're trying to go back. And so God in this moment has heard the complaints of his people, and he comes through. The Lord said to Moses, who was the leader of the Israelite people, look, I'm going to rain down food from heaven for you. Each day the people can go out and pick up as much food as they need for that day. I will test them in this to see whether or not they follow my instructions. So God has heard their complaints. And so he says, hey, I'm going to respond in a big way. Like he is a God of miracles. He says, I'm literally going to rain food from heaven down for you. And maybe you're kind of new to this whole church thing or the Bible thing. And you're like, this sounds crazy. You're right. It does sound crazy. Sometimes God's provision looks crazy. It's not what we expected it to be. And so he tells them, I'm going to provide this food for you, but there's this little addendum to what he shares. And his little addendum is this: hey, take only what you need for today. He promises to provide for them every day, but they have to start by trusting him today. And I think it is that everyday part where for many of us we start to get stuck, right? We're like, we don't want to wake up and start from scratch. We don't have to worry every single day. We're like, hey, I want enough for today and tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that, because it's a control thing. We think we're going to find security in being able to control things for ourselves. And while there's certainly, there's nothing wrong with working hard. There's nothing wrong with being wise with our resources. In fact, I encourage you, work hard, be wise with your resources. But I think sometimes we fool ourselves into thinking, hey, I'm working hard, when really what we're doing is hoarding, trying to get everything for ourselves. We're hoarding our time, our attention, our affirmation, our money, our possessions, our toilet paper. And we're doing it all out of this fear that there's not going to be enough for tomorrow. And the truth is, when we're hoarding, when we're trying to get everything for ourselves that we can get out of only what we know and only what we have, we can't experience God. And God cannot provide for us when we are too busy trying to provide for ourselves. That's not the way that it works. So God did not give his people a test hoping that they would fail. He gave them this test hoping that they would trust him so that he could keep on giving them good things. And so the Israelites, they get up the next morning, and here's what happens. The next morning, the area around the camp was wet with dew. When the dew evaporated, a flaky substance as fine as frost blanketed the ground. The Israelites were puzzled when they saw it. What is it? They asked each other. They had no idea what it was. And Moses told them, it is the food the Lord has given you to eat. What is this? They're like, this is not what we asked for. They did not see this coming. But remember when I shared about my mom going rogue and kind of getting us all these Christmas gifts that I think I'm never going to use, I'm never going to wear? I think sometimes in that moment I'll open it and I'll think, I've got no use for this because it's just not what I expected. It's not what I thought that it would be. But God, in some ways, is just like my mom. Or I guess maybe I should say my mom is like God. She knows better than I know. And he sees us sometimes and he sees, hey, I know exactly what you need. It just may not be what you want, or it may not come the way that you think that it'll come. And sometimes we miss out on what God is doing because what's right in front of us does not look like what we expected it to. We thought, I didn't write this down on my list. And sometimes God is answering our prayers in ways we just did not see coming. And if we only receive what we think we want, we're praying, we're asking God, God, this is what we want. If he gives us just what we want, we miss out on being able to experience what he has for us. And we know that our God that we serve, his ways are not our ways. He sees things that we don't see. His perspective is different. And so we've got to trust that our God, in his word, he tells us that he will give us exceedingly and abundantly more than we could ever ask for or imagine, but it's not always the way we think it'll be. We have to let go of our expectations to trust God in a new way. And the Israelites did too. Here's what it says. These were the Lord's instructions. Each household should gather as much as it needs. Pick up 2 quarts for each person in your tent. So the people of Israel did as they were told. Some gathered a lot, some only a little. But when they measured it out, everyone had just enough. Those who gathered a lot had nothing left over, and those who gathered only a little had enough. Each family had just what it needed. And then Moses told them, do not keep any of it until morning. So if you ever had something that you really wanted, maybe it was number 1 on your Christmas list and you received it, and in that moment, what happens? You're so elated, you're so excited, you're like, okay, I'm gonna savor this thing, I'm gonna protect this thing. But there's something that's inside all of us that once we get what we want, we start scheming on how we get more of it. Like, hey, if I feel this good with this amount in my bank account, I bet I'll feel so much better with this amount. If I feel like this was one thing, what about if I had 2 of them or 3 of them? And so we start scheming, and that's because there's this human desire in all of us to try to hoard, to try to get more. And so Moses knew this, and so he was reminding the people, hey, God said, don't hoard. There will be more tomorrow. You just have to trust him. And in that moment, the Israelites had a decision to make. Were they going to trust God, or were they going to trust themselves? And I think all of us come to these crossroads moments sometimes, or we have a decision to make. God's way or my way? Am I going to trust what God says, or am I going to do it my way? Will we trust God for tomorrow? Are we going to try to squeeze everything we can out of today? Will we rush around collecting everything that we can get our hands on and fool ourselves into thinking that we don't need God to provide for us? Are we going to fool ourselves into thinking we can provide for ourselves? We have to ask, are we going to trust God? Or are we going to be convinced we know the best way? Are we going to convince ourselves that we don't have time for practicing a slot and a spot, a time and a place in our day for God? Or are we going to convince ourselves that we don't have time to serve on the J team? That's for other people. Hey, I don't have time to give my life away. Or are we going to trust what God says? Are we going to try to stockpile everything we can for our own savings account instead of being generous? Are we going to refuse to give our emotional energy or capacity to the people in our lives who deserve it most because we're afraid we won't have any left over for ourselves? Are we going to trust God when he asks us to give and serve and pray and forgive and get in relationship and read his word? Or are we going to keep doing things the way that we think we should do things? We have a decision to make. And the Israelites had a decision to make too. And so here is what they decided. It says, but some of them didn't listen. Ever been there? Don't raise your hand. I've been there many times. Some of them did not listen. And they kept some of it until morning. But by then, it was full of maggots and had a terrible smell. Moses was very angry with them. It was not theirs to keep. God had said, hey, I will provide for you, but you've got to trust me. It wasn't theirs to keep, but they kept it anyways. And what happened? It got gross. It was inedible. And I think that happens to so many of us, because whatever we hold on to that we are not meant to hold on to, it eventually gets gross. Our passive aggressiveness, our scarcity mentality, our fear that there just won't be enough, our bitterness for another person, our pride, our greediness, all of those things are things that we are never meant to hold on to. And sometimes we scramble around. We think, hey, this is the thing, like this will help me get what I want. This is gonna serve me, but in the end, we realize all of those things, we end up serving them. And it's gross. And we're looking at our lives and we're like, this is not what I want. This is not where I thought I would be. And the truth is that we don't find security in those things. Security is not found in scrambling around for scraps. Security is found in trusting God. That's where we find our real security. And so many of us are scrambling around. And we don't even know why. I think some of us are convinced we're scrambling around because it is the year 2020 and money is tight and resources are scarce. But if we're honest with ourselves, we've been scrambling for a long time. We scrambled the same way in 2019. We just have this scrambling spirit about us where we're scrambling to hold on to what we think we want. We're scrambling to get to the next appointment and to do the next thing and to make a little bit more money. And we're scrambling for that person's approval and that person's affirmation. And we're scrambling around. And what are we? Anxious, worried, weary. And we're nowhere near where we were hoping that we would be. And we start to realize, wow, it doesn't matter if it is a grade, a promotion, a bank account, a relationship. None of those things are where we're going to find our ultimate security. Because our ultimate security can only come from trusting God. A few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to lead at our Potential Leadership Intensive. And I was talking to one of our leaders beforehand, and I was just so encouraged to hear what God was doing in her life. She just turned 50 years old, but she is fairly new to having a real relationship with God. She'd heard about God. She'd gone to church before, but it wasn't until she started coming here to the journey that she really developed a real relationship with God. And she's a small business owner, and she was sharing with me, she's like, hey, my whole life, I thought my purpose, my sole purpose was in being a wife. Then I thought my sole purpose was in being a mom. Then I thought my sole purpose was in being a small business owner, and like, it's just me. So, hey, I have to hustle, I have to scramble. And she said, but over the last few months, God has just stopped me and paused me and shown me my purpose is not in all of those things. My purpose is in him. And she was just talking about what God has done in her life and in her generosity and in her business as a result of this. And I thought, yes, that's what it's all about. She just emailed me yesterday morning and she said, hey, my family and I have been praying and we have something that we'd like to give towards the Christmas offering. Can we give it now or do we have to wait till next weekend? And I said, no, you can give it now. You don't have to wait. But I thought, what a picture that once we prioritize God above all else in our lives, we cannot wait to be generous. We cannot wait to give our lives away. We cannot wait to serve. It is a privilege because we know we're not going to find what we're looking for in scrambling around. We're going to find what we're looking for in Jesus. And she's got her eyes focused upwards. Because security is not found in scrambling for scraps. It's found in trusting God. And so when the Israelites finally stopped scrambling around and trusted that God would do what he already said he would do, send more tomorrow, here's what happened. After this, the people gathered the food morning by morning, each family according to its need. There was enough. He provided every single morning. They had what they needed. And I mentioned a little bit earlier, being a mom, I have an almost 2-year-old and I have a 4-year-old. And so meal times at my house are hectic, to say the least. If you've ever experienced eating with a toddler, you know what I mean. So when my 2-year-old finishes a meal, I think 30% of it is in his stomach and 10% is on his bib and 10% is in his hair that will maybe or maybe not get out sometime in the next few days. And then the remaining 50% of his meal is on the floor, just everywhere. I'm always stepping on something. I'm like, is that a blueberry, a raisin, chocolate? Who really knows? Just permanently crusted into my floor. And so after mealtime is over, that's my cue to open the basement door, and my dog comes bounding up the stairs. And he's like, yes, it is a good day. And what does he do? He scrambles around for scraps. Because to him, he's like, I don't care if this is a crusty egg, I'll take it. I don't care if this is a raisin, a blueberry, a piece of chocolate. Hey, I'll take it. And so he's scrambling around for these scraps. And I think some of us find ourselves in that same place where we're scrambling around and all we have are scraps. And we've convinced ourselves, this is what I want. Hey, this is good enough for me. This is what I want. I'll make do with these crusty eggs. I'll make do with these leftovers. And I think God is looking at us saying, hey, I am a God of provision. And I will hand you my platter of provision, but you've got to trust me. We don't have to settle for scraps. In fact, scraps are for the dogs. God has so much more for us. And sometimes God will give us a tray full of fresh food and overflowing with everything that we've wanted. And sometimes he'll give us exactly what we need. But he'll never let us where we are. Because when we trust him, we can know we are secure. We'll always have what we need, but sometimes we can't see it because we're distracted, we're discouraged, we're complaining, we're working ourselves to the bone, and God is just like, hey, trust me. Trust me. I've got more for you tomorrow. And I think for many of us, one of the hardest areas for us to trust God is with our finances. And if you're not sure yet what you believe about Jesus, that's okay. Like, you can take a pass on this. But if you live in the freedom of what God has done for us through Christ Jesus, being generous back to what matters to God is not just something good to do. It is an act of trust. And so it's something that God asks of each of us. And so when we tithe, which is what the Bible calls giving the first 10% of everything that we make back to God, we are not just saying we trust God, we are actually trusting God. Because sometimes we say we trust, but our actions do not align with what we're saying. And so when we consistently and faithfully give our first, what we are saying is true about us, that we trust God, it actually becomes true about us, that we trust God. And we've got to remember that God never asks something from us unless he has more for us. And so often we think, well, God just wants something from me. No, he doesn't. God wants something for me. And so I will never forget when my husband and I first got married, and we made this decision to begin tithing, not just once, but every week, faithfully and consistently giving our first. That was a hard decision to make because we were newly married. Our combined household income was like just under $50,000 a year, but our combined student loan debt was over $150,000. Like, we were just drowning in student loan debt. And some of you can relate to that. Some of you are drowning in legitimate debt. And so to hear somebody talk about giving, I was like, giving? We're barely eating sometimes. But I remember coming together and making that decision and saying, hey, we're going to trust God in this area. And so on the weeks where we had a little bit more than we thought, we gave. And on the weeks when we had less than we thought, we gave. It just became this habit for us. And I'll never forget, a couple of years into this decision to keep giving, we had a really tough week. We had a big, unexpected financial loss that we hadn't known about, a big bill we didn't know about. And we were so tight on money. It was like one of those weeks where we were like, is it Friday yet? We literally could not go to the store until we got paid on Friday. And I was meeting with someone who had hired me to do some like marketing consulting work for her. And so we were meeting there, we're talking. At the end of our time together, she handed me a check. And I've never gotten paid for work before I've actually done it. So I was young, and I was just like, here, I tried to like give it back to her. And I was like, oh, I didn't do anything yet. Like, you can pay me when I do something. And I remember looking at me and saying, hey, I've got faith in you. Like, just take it. And I remember the feeling of going home that night. And I told Andy, I was like, look at what we got. And it was not thousands of dollars, let me be clear. But when you can't go to the grocery store, we're like, we're getting in the car. We're going to Acme. And we didn't buy just necessities. Like, I got some ice cream. He got some chips. And we're like, we are living the good life. Like, God will provide for us. But the truth was, we didn't know about that check when we started giving. Trust requires us to obey before we see the blessing. We have to trust and put our security and hope in God. And the Israelites had to do the same thing. And when they did, what did they end up with? Something that they weren't even sure what it was. The Israelites called this food manna. Manna means, what is it? They didn't know what it was. Remember, they were puzzled. So they had to come up with a name for it, and they said, well, let's just call it what it is. What is it? We don't know. What is it? And when they had stopped scrambling around, and they finally put all of their security and their hope in God, they realized, hey, he's going to come through today and tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. So I want you to look around at your life. Where's your manna? What is the thing that right now you are staring in the face and you are thinking, what is it? I didn't ask for this. This wasn't on my list. This isn't how I envisioned my life going. This isn't how I envisioned my relationship with my kid or my spouse. This is not what I thought would happen. What is it? And so we're staring at depression or an addiction or a job loss or financial insecurity or failing a grade, and we're thinking, what is it? And God is looking at it, and he's saying, hey, if you just realize, if you will stop and pause, you'll see that there's a miracle in your manna. But you have to stop questioning and complaining and trying to quickly move forward. You gotta just stay here and say, God, thank you for this moment. Thank you for this relationship. Thank you for this struggle. Because it is in our gratitude that we'll see God was there all along. He's with us in our best moments. He's with us in our worst moments, and every moment in between, because our security is not found in a circumstance. Our security is not even found in a blessing. Our security is found in God. And if you needed that reminder this weekend, would you just raise your hand? I want to take a moment and pray over us together. I know I needed that this weekend. God, we come to you and we thank you for being a God of provision. God, we trust you. I pray right now that we are a people who don't just say we trust you, God, that we actually act out of that trust. I pray right now, whatever we're staring in the face, whatever circumstance that we did not expect, that we're looking at it and we're saying, what is it? God, I pray right now you will give us a peace that surpasses all understanding, God, to know it will be okay because you are with us, God. You are for us, and nothing and no one can separate us from the love of Jesus Christ. And Lord, we thank you for that this morning. All of us come to this point in our lives where we have a decision to make. My way or God's way. And God knew that we all have something inside of us called sin. All those things that we think, say, and do that separate us from God. And God loved us so much that he refused to let us be separated from him by sin for the rest of our lives. That's why he sent his son, Jesus. Jesus died on a cross, and he did it so that he could pay the price for sins that we could never repay. He did it so that we could be brought into a right relationship with God. And the Word of God says that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. There's no other way to experience God except through believing in Jesus alone. And if you've never made that decision once and for all, your way or God's way, I encourage you, I pray that today is your day. You don't have to jump through any hoops. You don't have to scramble around. You don't have to do a bunch of things. All you have to do is say, Jesus, you're in charge. You are leader and Lord of my life. And I want to lead us in prayer together. If that's you, I encourage you, pray with me. God, I come to you and I'm tired of my way. God, I pray that today your way is my way. Right now, I put my faith in Jesus Christ. He is the leader and Lord of my life. I'll stop scrambling. I'll stop trying to get it all on my own. God, I put my faith and my trust fully in you. And if you just pray that prayer with me, would you raise your hand this morning? If you're online, you made that decision. You can just type faith in the comments. Yeah, we believe that's the most important decision that you're ever going to make. You can put those hands down. And Jordy, will you help me celebrate everybody putting their faith in Jesus today?
That was so powerful. Our security is found in trusting in God. If you put your faith in him today, let us know by typing faith in the chat or by going to connectwithus.tv. we'll send you a new believer's Bible to guide you in this next step. It's so hard to believe, but we're now in December, and with the Christmas season here, sometimes it feels like trusting God can be just a little harder than usual. You might be wondering how you're going to make ends meet this month and provide your family and friends with gifts under the tree. Well, just like God provided manna in the desert for the Israelites, He'll also provide to us, His people. We just have to decide to obey. And if you're not sure about this faith thing yet, that's okay. You can take a pass on this. But if Jesus is leader and Lord in your life, God calls us to give our first, or the first 10% of our income, back to God. And with that 90% He entrusts us with, He's going to do so much more than you think. I just want to challenge you today to give your first back to God. Text GIVETJ to 94,000 or head to the Journey app to start giving. Now, last weekend, Pastor Mark shared a powerful message with us about the need for us to look for the one. We are so passionate about finding those who are lost and helping them find Jesus that we've created a wallpaper for you to save on your phones as a reminder. Our hosts are dropping the links for that wallpaper into the chat for you right now. And if you filled out a Connect card today, we'll be sending you a coin as a reminder of the one is worth everything. If today was your first time gathering with us, let us know at connectwithus.tv, and we'll also send you a gift in the mail to say thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification bell. We want to keep you connected with everything that's happening here. Thank you so much for joining us online today. We'll see you next time. Go invite a friend and enjoy the journey.